Hello, this is the non-dual lectionary for the Transfiguration, also the last Sunday in Epiphany in year A. And this is the Transfiguration story in Matthew. Last year we did the Transfiguration story in Luke, and the stories are very, very similar. Um, Last year I mostly did a take inspired by Adyashanti's Resurrecting Jesus about the story as part of Jesus's awakening experience or kind of reaffirming awakening experience. And this year I want to take it from a slightly different angle. So let's read the story, Matthew's version again, and then we'll talk just a little bit. So it's Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came and touched them. Get up, he said. Don't be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. So again, last year's the very, very similar story from Luke talked about, this is Jesus's experience, right? Manifesting um, his own awakening, his non-dual recognition, and an account of that, right? And I'll put a link to that video in the comments because I think it's still a very valid way to look at it. It has some really nice insights here. This is a really cool story, right? But I want to take a slightly different angle this year, uh, so that there's just layers and layers, right? And this year, um, not taking this as a story about Jesus at all, not his awakening experience or his reaffirming awakening experience, but as a glimpsing experience by the disciples, Peter, James, and John. So, and from that perspective, right, what we have here is their devotion to a teacher, the teacher exemplifying for them, right? Like the divine or along the path they're externalizing of their true nature, right? Like they can see it out, like oftentimes this is true for us, right? We can see it out there before we can see it in ourselves. And when we see it out there, we often see it in two starkly different ways, right? One is like this super idealized thing, and the other is this entirely horrible, frightening thing. Because the truth is, it's both. I mean, non-dual means everything, right? But it includes those extremes. It includes both the recognition that underline everything in our true nature, right now is the shining in everyone and everything through everything, always. And the depth of that, right? The like a black hole because it swallows up everything that we think we are. And so when we can see both of those from our small self perspective, right? We can see the glimpses of both of those. And so here, I think we see both actually from the disciples, right? They externalize it onto Jesus, right? They can see it out there, and so what they see in Jesus is the shining, right? The externalized, idealized true nature. And what happens to them is they fall face down to the ground, terrified. And a lot of us, I think, who have, had some kind of experience, this resonates with. I mean, I've told this story before, right? About one of my first experiences of just sitting, meditating, and having the sense that myself was dropping away. And instinct, I mean, I really it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like a decision, but not a choice, if that makes sense. I just started like screaming inside my head, like holding on to that, right? Um, and I've had other experiences too where similarly, right? I kind of this fear comes up of like everything's going to drop away, or I'm going to lose everything that I care about. And in the second time when I had that an experience like that, that really seemed like it fell face front to me. Um, I kind of said okay, and again, it didn't feel like a choice. There was a decision. I could kind of observe the decision happening, but I didn't like choose one or the other, if that makes sense. And so that time it kind of just was like okay. And then on the other side there was something else, right? But that that reaction of fear um, is totally understandable. And then Jesus as their teacher, again, what does he say? Well, don't be afraid, right? He's their guide here. And it's not that, again, that they can even, it's not try not to be afraid. It's not, it's just like don't be afraid, right? He knows. He's been there. He's their, he's their externalization, but also their guide through this, right? And then when they look up, all they see is him, right? Because I mean that the blinding experience has passed, but the normality of it has returned, and who knows what it means for them right in the next moment, right? It's not necessarily trying to obtain the same experience again. And then the last hint to them, right? Again, like as their experience, but being guided by a teacher, right? Is the teacher saying, "Don't tell anyone what you've seen." And then the last part too, but don't tell anyone what you've seen, right? And why not? Well, because but the telling oftentimes becomes the concretization, becomes turning the realization into an idea, right? Into a concept. And especially in those like, those glimpse experiences, which is what I'm describing here, right? Just a momentary opening for them. If you turn it into an idea, then it just becomes a memory. It becomes a thing that happened and not an opening it into something else or and not even a glimpse into true nature necessarily, right? But an experience to have again, if you like it. Um, but also not, don't tell anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. And of course, when we read that, in the traditional sense, we're like, until this particular time, right? Later on. And you can come up with a reason why and all that. But, if we don't think about it that way, if we think about this as the Son of Man raised from the dead being like true nature, right? Like coming forward to itself, right? It's a statement of not like, hey, don't tell anybody about this experience until this later time. It becomes, hey, don't turn this into a concept, and don't even worry about the concepts of it until this glimpse experience you've had has flowered forth, right, into like a full realization. And so, if we look at it that way, like, wow, again, this is like a really cool story about, a like it seems extreme, right? It seems like a big fireworks type experience, but it's just a glimpse into what is always, right? And the way that our small self filters all that through, both, in the extremes. And then Jesus kind of bringing it all back, right? Hey, don't be afraid. Don't talk about it. This really is just what is. And so as you manifest and recognize that all the more clearly, deep in your bones, then, it'll just flower forth. So again, the transfiguration, what a cool story. And from all these different angles, how neat is that?